It all begins in the Kepler 209 space colony. Due to the activities of mankind and climate change, the Earth has become uninhabitable. For mankind's survival, due to that they settle in space. Years have passed, and the authorities sent a team of astronauts to Earth to see if it is habitable. For a living, the astronauts encounter disaster on the way and crash by a seaside, but a girl named Louise survives. Holden the second teammates die on the spot, and Tucker the third among them stuck in the wreckage with an injured leg. So she has no other options than to go on the mission alone.
Tucker tells her that a storm is coming, and Louise loses her visibility when a thick fog surrounds her, so Tucker climbs out of the capsule and shoots up a flare. Following the light, Louise slowly begins making her way back to the shuttle, unaware that a mysterious man also saw the flare. He gets to the shuttle first and attacks Tucker, who defends himself with the flare gun and scares him away. By the time Louise finally crosses the fog, she finds out that Tucker and the shuttle have been taken somewhere else. She can hear Tucker yelling for help, so she uses the scope on her gun and notices a group of people dragging her shuttle. Suddenly another group attacks her from behind and Louise loses consciousness.
Sometime later, she finds herself in a pit with Tucker. Suddenly a rope was thrown down. When she climbed it up, she was surprised at what she saw, and was also asked to save a man's life, who was hit by Tucker's flare gun.
She also notices someone has her red bag, knowing the biometer is inside. When she's thrown back in the pit, she gives Tucker medicine while telling him about all the kids and babies she saw. Since their ship is broken, she believes that they must find the biometer and use it to call for help. However, Tucker knows his injuries are bad and he won't make it, so he takes a solution that he stores in his army tag necklace and ends things for himself. Feeling lonely now, Louise. At that moment, the tides finally come in and start to fill the pit, so Louise begins climbing up again. Grabbing onto the lid, she asks for help, and a guy accepts to take her out and tie her to one of the community's boats. Louise behaves to gain their trust while watching a net retrieve Tucker's body. As the boat takes off in the middle of the night, Louise watches Tucker's body being sent away on a raft, and this inspires another flashback. The water begins to recede and Louise is thrown back in the pit. Suddenly she's visited medical spray. By drawing on the wall, Louise finally manages to communicate with the girl and learns a few words, so she asks Mila to help her get the biometer. Sometime later, Louise hears screaming outside and the lid is raised for a man to lower some girls and a baby into the pit. By spying through the hole, Louise sees that the settlement is being attacked and many people are being killed or kidnapped. Mila found the red bag, but she's kidnapped as well. A man comes to the pit to check inside, but Louise and the children hide just in time. After the situation calms down, Narvik shows up to help them out, revealing that she is Mila's mother. After picking Mila's doll and Tucker's flare gun, Narvik runs off to save her daughter. Louise follows her because she wants to help her to save Mila, but Narvik isn't sure she can trust her even if she does share some food with her. At that moment they can hear Mila's screams from afar, so the two women climb on a big rock and learn that the captives are being taken away on a boat. Louise tells Narvik to shoot the flare gun into the sky as a distraction, but Narvik wants to attack blindly, so Louise has no choice but to knock her out. Then Louise shoots the flare, and the men begin looking for the source of the light. While they are distracted, Louise jumps into the water with the fog acting as cover and she quickly swims to the boat. After climbing up, she finally finds her red bag in a net, but before she can leave, the men come aboard as well. Louise has no choice but to hide with Malia and the other prisoners.
The next day, the prisoners were sent to a guard named Palingand. He sent them to work around the ship.
Then Paling finds Louise's gun in the red bag, and while looking for the owner, he realizes Louise isn't a local. Paling takes her through a corridor, and after searching her, he introduces her to Ulysses 1 and remembers Louise from when she was a kid. Louise tells him what happened to her ship and about the missing biometer, and in return Gibson tells her of his group's first encounter with the Muds when they arrived. Blake had been very good with the locals, but one day, they suddenly rebelled and destroyed the Ulysses 1 capsule along with its communication equipment, killing Blake in the process. Apparently Blake had a plan to build a giant dam and use the ocean as electricity, so Gibson discusses with Louise the chances of bringing people from the colony back to Earth. A tour of the place to show off the dam, Gibson takes Louise to a cabin where she can stay for now. She immediately goes to bed and tries to deal with her grief while remembering more science lessons with her father. The next morning after a shower, Louise finds blood between her legs and realizes that she is fertile, so she could reproduce here. Afterward she's taken to a class full of the daughters of the Muds, including Mila, who doesn't look very happy. Gibson is educating them, and after they share a song, he gives them the chance to ask Louise all kinds of questions about the space colony. Once the class is over, Louise goes for a walk and finds Neil, who gets private lessons instead of joining the others. He likes Louise because he loves astronauts, and after she helps him with his math homework, he shows her a secret that keeps hiding behind a curtain. It's a small tree growing in a jar. Recognizing the experiment, Louise asks Neil how he learned to do that, and he replies that there is a strange man living in a cabin next to the engine room. Louise wants Neil to take her there, but he isn't supposed to talk to the man at all and refuses. After taking a map of the ship from a door, Louise quickly makes her way to the man's cabin, where she learns that her father is alive and has been locked away all this time. At that moment, Gibson shows up and begins justifying his lies by explaining that Blake actually led the rebellion because he sided with the Mudds after falling in love with a Mud woman. Then Louise is finally allowed inside and reunites with her dad after 15 years. Later, when the tide is high, Louise finally gets to see the weather station where they can connect the biometer to contact Kepler. She decides to tell Gibson that she is fertile so she can be the evidence they need, and Gibson promises to find the biometer. Then Louise is invited to dinner and Neil's mother goes off and Paling informs Gibson that an intruder took out the guards to reach the power box. Gibson immediately orders everyone to hide in their room before leaving with a gun. Louise takes a corridor to return to her cabin only to be caught by the intruder, who holds a knife to Louise's throat and hurts her. It's then revealed that the intruder is Narvik, who is looking for her daughter. Louise takes Narvik to see Mila, but as soon as they enter the girl's room, they are suddenly surrounded by guards. The women try to fight them while Mila cries out for her mother, but Paling shows up and kicks Narvik, somehow knowing her name. Then Paling orders his men to take Narvik away, but before she leaves, she whispers to Louise that they only take the girls and accidentally drops Mila's doll. Afterward, power returns and Moon Knight treats Louise's wound as she mysteriously says she has his eyes. Louise looks at the posters on the wall and notices they're all photos of girls and pregnancies. At that moment Gibson comes to check on her and tells Louise that Narvik was one of the guards who turned against him during the rebellion too. Suddenly Paling comes in with the red bag, but when Gibson opens it, the biometer isn't inside. He sends Louise away and tells Paling to keep an eye on her before turning to his son, who shows him a doll he found. Gibson then notices that the biometer is inside the doll. When she returns to her room, Louise hears a noise and finds Mila hiding in her closet, but Paling suddenly knocks on her door and forces his way in because he heard a kid is missing. He looks around quickly and doesn't find Mila, but instead of leaving, he begins hitting on Louise, not caring about her turning him down. After some struggle, he pushes her against the wall, but before he can take advantage of her, he hears a noise coming from the closet. Paling moves to investigate, but Louise rushes to him and distracts him with a kiss. Suddenly Paling starts shaking and falls to the ground as he dies because Louise slipped into his mouth the poison capsule from her army tag necklace. Afterward, Louise takes Paling's weapon and together with Mila, begins sneaking around the ship. When they encounter a guard, Mila distracts him and Louise knocks him out from behind. Then they reach the cell where they keep all the prisoners they use as work slaves. Narvik is there too and Louise gives her the guard's weapon before she escapes with the others. While the prisoners rescue the girls, Louise goes to find Blake, who shows her something at the window. It turns out Gibson is going to the weather station with Neil and Moon Eye, which is weird because he never leaves the ship. Then Louise notices the doll Neil gifted Blake and realizes that Gibson has the biometer. She doesn't understand what proof Gibson will send without her, and Blake reveals Neil isn't a Mudd. Louise hugs her dad as she accepts to stop Gibson, and Blake tells her he never lit his last match. Louise shoots any guard that comes too close and helps the group reach a boat before getting in the water to swim to the weather station. Gibson has taken Neil's blood and is about to send the message, but Louise reveals herself and threatens him with her weapon. Gibson responds by pointing his gun at Neil, revealing that he's Blake's son and therefore her half-brother. Moon Eye tries to defend her son, but Gibson simply shoots her in the head. Louise lowers her weapon to save Neil from the same fate, and Gibson immediately sends the data to Kepler using the biometer. Since he's distracted, Louise uses the chance to tackle him into the water, then she strangles and drowns Gibson, almost drowning herself in the process. Fortunately, Narvik rescues her and manages to revive her with CPR. Louise and Blake rejoin the Mudds, and all of them set out on a tugboat. Neil is grieving his mother's death, so Louise goes to talk to him and gifts him her matchbox as a sign of hope. Moments later, a group of children are playing around back in the settlement and get scared when they see figures in the fog. However, they perk up when they realize it's their kidnapped parents who are finally free from Gibson's control.